NASA has said it will allow SpaceX to take its astronauts into orbit on reused spaceships, something the US Space Agency had not previously permitted. This could be a big step for SpaceX, given that reusability is one of the key steps behind the firm's mission to bring down the eye-watering costs of space travel. The news follows a modification to NASA's $2.7 billion commercial crew contract that it made with SpaceX back in 2014. We've recently seen NASA take huge strides towards fulfilling their goals as a space agency that is acting on behalf of the world's largest economy. Welcome to News Breakdown. If this is the first time you're joining me, please consider hitting the subscribe button and push the bell notification button so that you don't miss a video. If you're listening to the audio version of this episode on whatever podcast platform you're listening on, please hit the subscribe button. The Demo 2 historic test flight had initially only been contracted for 2 weeks, but now we will see the 2 astronauts stay on the ISS potentially until August, though it could end sooner. NASA officials say that the Demo 2 test flight is due to end with the Crew Dragon capsule, which is still docked to the ISS, splashing down into the Atlantic Ocean with the help of parachutes. Although Mr. Hurley and Mr. Beckman are doing real work on the ISS at the moment, the mission is officially anyway still just a test. Once the 2 return back to Earth in a couple of months, NASA will review the mission before officially giving SpaceX's Crew Dragon capsule the agency's seal of approval. Once approval has been issued by NASA, this will allow normal crewed missions to take place, rotating astronauts to and from the space stations at the start of the end of their several month-long shifts. The missions will then be referred to as Crew 1, Crew 2, and so on. It's after this second official crewed mission, Crew 2, that the astronaut will reuse a SpaceX capsule and or booster for the first time. So the first post-certification crewed launch, Crew 1, will have to involve a brand new Dragon capsule and Falcon 9 rocket. A NASA spokesman added to this, SpaceX has proposed to reuse the future Falcon 9 and all the Dragon systems or components for NASA missions to the International Space Station because they believe it will be beneficial from a safety and a cost standpoint. And the key point to take away from this statement is the cost part. The quicker the cost comes down, the quicker we can find ourselves on Mars. So that statement leads me to the plan that NASA has in place. In this episode, we'll take a look at the plan NASA has in place. NASA's long-term goal is to set up a base on the moon, and from there, be able to send people to explore Mars as part of the Artemis program. Having a long-term lunar presence would allow more efficient travel to distant parts of the solar system, as well as the potential for more discoveries about the moon itself. The planned lunar base would include elements like a vehicle for transporting astronauts around the moon's surface, some kind of mobile habitation to allow astronauts to travel across the moon for up to 45 days at a time, and a more permanent lunar habitation structure where up to 4 astronauts could leave for a short period of time. So as mentioned at the top of the episode, NASA signed a $2.7 billion commercial crew contract with SpaceX back in 2014. In relation to the original contract that was signed, one of the key aims for SpaceX was to return manned spaceflight to US soil for the first time since the retirement of the Space Shuttle fleet in July 2011. We saw this being achieved recently with the launch of the Dragon capsule. Since 2011, NASA has relied on the Russian Space Agency to send its astronauts to the ISS at a cost of about $71 million per seat. That relationship came under pressure amid growing political tensions between Washington and Moscow over Ukraine. At the time, SpaceX had stiff competition to win the contract, beating out a challenge from Sierra Nevada Corporation. The development of lower Earth orbit operations was put out to tender to private space companies, all competing for NASA funds under the Commercial Crew Initiative. The modification to NASA's contract with SpaceX reads, the purpose of this bilateral modification is to extend the Demo 2 flight test from 2 weeks to up to 119 days and add the requirements for 45th Operations Group D Attachment 3, or also known as DET3, joint test training for PCM-1 through PCM-6 in exchange for allowing reuse of the Falcon 9 launch vehicle and Crew Dragon spacecraft beginning with PCM-2. 2. What this means is that NASA astronauts will be allowed to fly on reused Crew Dragon capsules and Falcon 9 boosters from SpaceX's third crew launch. This third crew launch is supposed to take place next year. In addition, the modification of the contract also extends the Demo 2 test flight as mentioned earlier in the episode. This will extend NASA's astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken's mission aboard the International Space Station. So in this section of the episode, we'll be taking a look at the benefits of the modification to this contract. With the modification of the contract, I do believe this will benefit both parties. With SpaceX, this will allow them to continue to develop their whole space program, which involves getting to Mars. It also means a guaranteed cash injection from NASA over the next few years, and this will certainly strengthen the relationship between SpaceX and NASA. In regards to NASA, this is certainly a step towards the right direction. I believe for NASA to outsource some of the work, or the logistics I should say, of getting to space to a privately owned company definitely lifts a lot of weight off their shoulders. What this means is that NASA only needs to provide their astronauts to take their seats on a privately owned spacecraft at a heavily discounted price in comparison to what the Russians were charging per seat. It means NASA can focus on the important projects that they may have in the pipeline. So in conclusion, I do believe that this is something that will benefit both companies massively moving forward in our quest to explore our solar system and beyond. Thank you so much for tuning into News Breakdown. If this is the first time you're joining me on the channel, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Also hit that bell notification button. If you are listening to the audio version on whatever podcast platform you're listening on, please consider subscribing as well. Thank you so much for tuning into News Breakdown.